Score, the podcast. The only show taking you inside the studios of the world's most celebrated composers and musicians.
This is a special episode of Score, the podcast. I'm your host, Kenny Holmes. I'm here with Robert Kraft.
Hey.
Hey, Robert. And, of course, our executive producer, Mash Raider.
That's me. Hey, guys.
Nice.
I'll explain that really quick. Somebody on Twitter sent us a message, and they thought Matt's name was Mash, M-A-S-H, Raider.
Yeah.
Mash Raider.
Yeah.
And they said, it's probably just a Hollywood name.
A Hollywood name, right?
I've already copywritten it for a new video game, actually. Mash Raiders.
My brother said it sounded like somebody on Thanksgiving who's in the kitchen too much. The Mash Raider.
Mash Raiders, right.
That's me around Thanksgiving, yeah.
As I mentioned, this is a special edition of Score the Podcast because we are coming up on the 1-year anniversary. Actually, we are just hitting it. Of the theatrical release of Score, a film music documentary, and we wanted to, we have a lot of people asking us questions on our social media about things about the production of the film and reasons why we did certain things, and we did have one director track on the Blu-ray that's on our website
by Mash Raider,
featuring Mash Raider, but we decided that it would be cool to kind of get some of our key people from the crew together.
Yeah, our production was kind of unique on the whole movie that we put together. And over a couple years, we had a lot of different kind of strategies, not just in doing the 60-something interviews, but also in just assembling it all. So there's a lot of interesting things that didn't make the collector's edition of our Blu-ray DVD that's on our website, score-movie.com. And that's what we'll be playing along here. But there's hopefully a little insight that everyone can lend.
So we're gonna watch the film, and we'll be starting the film at the 5-minute mark of this podcast.
Exactly at 5 minutes. We're about 2 in now.
And we actually have a guest with us today, is one of our executive producers, John Wilbanks.
Yeah.
Say hello, everyone.
Hey. John was a producer, was instrumental, pardon the pun, on the movie as a producer and helping us navigate a lot of different logistical things and also creative things down the line. So, John, feel free to...
Business aspects and distribution aspects.
Yeah, and if
John,
you were a
helpful.
Kickstarter backer, you probably heard from John at some point because he was
Almost
instrumental of making sure all of that stuff was delivered. And
if you didn't get something appropriately or on time...
Send your hate mail to Robert Kraft.
Darn, you beat me to it. Hey, Matt, I was wondering just before we roll...
It's MASH.
And MASH, just before we roll... MASH Raiders of the Lost Ark, in our past year, can you just roll through a couple of the highlights where Score, I know we had some great accolades on iTunes and
we've had
Amazon.
A really good run. Over the last year, we came out in June of last year and did a rolling release of the film. So we started in New York and LA and moved into a bunch of other cities all through that process. But we were really fortunate. We
and
had
countries.
Really strong reviews starting out, which was a relief because we were all very panicked.
I framed the New York Times review in my house.
And then we were a New York Times critics' pick. They gave us a positive review. And, of course, there's plenty of flaws in the movie, too. But we were fortunate to come out with most of our reviews being positive.
Matt and I were in New York with Bear McCreary, and we grabbed the New York Times off the street that day and found it. We saw that the article came out, the review, but then finding it in the physical paper, that was a pretty cool moment.
Yeah, seeing what we've been working on for a couple years on that page. So anyway, we had a very strong run at a lot of film festivals. We're lucky enough to win awards at 8 or 9 different film festivals. Some of them we were able to go to, some of them we weren't. Our focus has been trying to get the film into different territories so people all over the world can see it. And you can order the film through our website, any place that we don't have some distribution in place, but
a region-free Blu-ray.
A region-free thing, because that messes up
like free-range
DVD
chicken.
players for. I don't think it's the same thing.
Region-free Blu-ray and an NTSC formatted Region 0 DVD.
There you go.
I think that the first episode of MASH Raider is called Region 0.
Should you guys want to count it down or something?
3, 2, 1,
play.
go.
All right, here we go.
All right. Epiclef Media. There we
Looking
go.
at the
Matt,
logo.
what's the name Epiclef? Let's start with that.
We made it up.
Okay.
There's nothing to it there.
I think of it as an epic clef. You know,
Yeah.
like there's the G clef,
Yeah.
and there's the bass clef, and there's the C clef.
There is an extra F at the end of that.
just to confuse people.
Just to confuse people. We
Oh,
were
yes.
saying that it's the notation on sheet music that the F means with strength or with gusto or whatever.
Forte,
The
double forte.
Forte. Yeah, right.
Oh, Malibu. I remember this day.
Are we hearing
Which
we're-
day?
oh,
A couple times we went up there.
Yeah, but those opening shots it was a really cool sunset that day.
The problem with this is that it's out in the elements.
Marco Beltrami.
Disintegrates.
This shot is so overexposed. Now I see it every time. We didn't when we first shot it, but all the sky is so just blown out.
Shout out to the guys at Blacklist for coloring that. a little
Helping
bit.
clean it up a little bit, right?
You know, it's interesting. My experience watching this the first time, I had a somewhat different perspective than everyone else in the room because I had specifically asked to wait to see the sequences until, a rough cut was put together, so that I could come in and kind of be that objective
couple
set of
versions
eyes.
in,
And
right?
Yeah, it was. I think it was the third version. I think was when you guys brought me in, and
Yeah, right. Keep going. You're good.
Sorry,
We're
that we had
setting levels of the microphone as you're going.
Oh, sorry, that we had a technical issue. But yeah, I thought that this was such an interesting hook as a sequence, and it's not what you expect as an opening shot or a sequence for a film about music. But then you see this incredibly creative, kind of ghostly, machination of Marco Beltrami here, and I think it really sets the tone for what the movie is and the ride that we're about to take people on.
Well, this scene was not the opening scene of the film. In the first probably 5 or 6 cuts, it started out with a Rocky sequence, and I remember our cinematographer Nate, our other producer who couldn't be here today, he brought up the idea: what if we start the film with this kind of obscure, something that, like a tease ahead of just something really weird that you're not
some
expecting.
intrigue.
And we threw it in there and we watched it, and then it went to black, and the Rocky thing started after that, and it was like, wow, that was kind of what to expect, because a lot of movies about music and stuff like that, it's not going to start outside. So it was an interesting play.
You would
I
expect.
thought it was great.
Yeah.
Great choice. It's also a little bit. There's a story that Hans may tell in this. I can't remember if he tells it because we talked about it, but I don't think we captured it in this final version of the film. How Gladiator actually has a kind of entrance of the hand on the wheat
Yeah.
that was never in the film until they got the right music,
Yeah.
and they got the scene. And Hans, I think, suggested to Ridley what a way to sort of, I think in filmmaking sometimes you call it left footing
Yeah,
the
right.
sequence, which is instead of starting the way it's going to start at the beginning right here with, here the old footage of people coming out of movie theaters and John Burlingame talking about movie music. You started with that Marco Beltrami thing. Oh, wow, this is going to be deeper maybe than just a by the book.
and we might be introduced to some weird instruments, not the same orchestral sound that you may
Correct.
think you're expecting to see with just the standard orchestra, which is great, and there was a lot of great moments with that too. But
Oh, the Wurlitzer.
This made me nervous. Remember when we were editing, I thought this went, who's going to be interested in this? Now I love it, of course. But I remember the first time I saw this sequence at the Wurlitzer, I thought, oh no, people think this is old-fashioned. We're actually
Right.
about contemporary film music. But it really has merit as it
It was a cool
progresses.
thing. Yeah, I mean, I had some debate about how well that fit in, but people seem to really think that old, the old theater organ, the Wurlitzer, is and of course they painted all kinds of things at this. This is the what is it? Old Town Music Hall in El Segundo.
I was going to say, it does help too that the
wow.
visuals, the fluorescent painting, it kind of makes it modernized a little and visually, instead of it just being the Wurlitzer sitting there. There was some cool things to look
And
at.
originally the Wurlitzers were off to the side. You'd have the guy playing music off to the side, but that's a really cool place if you get a chance to go down if you're in the LA area. El Segundo,
Yeah,
the
El Segundo.
Old Town Music Hall, and you might see Leonard Maltin there. He goes there pretty frequently.
Oh, really? This is a great sequence with King Kong.
Robert, get right up in the microphone if you can.
On so many levels. I really love
I love the David
Newman. Yeah, talking about
kitschy and stupid. I think every time we were watching a screening on that, people started cracking up because it's true. I mean, this does. If you watch that on mute, it's kind of corny looking, but once that music's in there, it definitely has a major impact.
It's crazy that this is like, what, 85 years ago?
Wow.
You know?
And also, you wouldn't think that this epic of film was also epic for the music. You'd think, oh, it's just King Kong, a great movie, but actually there's another part of it. Oh, Alfred Newman. I sat in his chair
with
for
his cigarette.
Almost 2 decades.
That's right, at Fox.
Yep, I was in that office. I was
Did you ever meet? You never met him, did you?
No, he passed away. And I didn't meet him or his younger brother, Lionel, who was the next head of music.
Yep.
And there it is. Those are the great photographs that's the stage I worked on for 20 years.
This story, when I first heard this Fox logo story.
Isn't it great?
That's so crazy.
Yeah.
I wonder just every time that music comes up, they were like, oh.
And then
we blew it.
We took David into the studio to re-record it in 96 and really give it a little bit of a contemporary.
Man, he does so
Is that the version they're still using?
Yes. Right now it's the David Newman version. In some ways, just to make, we didn't have one that wasn't stereo, phonic, 5.1, all that stuff. We had the original logo music.
Yeah.
He's so busy. Every time I see there's a show or something at the Hollywood Bowl, it's David Newman conducting. That he does so many live concerts.
Yeah. That's become
I've been trying to figure out, Leonard Maltin has a pin on all through this, and I remember when we interviewed him, and I can't remember what the pin was. There's a little bit of a reflection on that, so it always draws my eye.
Maybe the next scene will.
Oh man, this day was so cool. I think it was. Were you there, Matt? I think it might have just been. Were you in the room?
Well, I feel like I was in the room for everything now because I've seen this so many times.
I think because of the amount of people, it might have just.
I don't think I was.
Nate and I were in the corner.
This is one of my favorites, and this was a really great favor that Jim Cameron did to, I'd done Titanic and Avatar with him.
Right, yeah.
And kind of trepidatiously said, we're making this documentary, and we wanted James Horner to be in it. And, of course, James Horner had, while we were in the middle of filming, had that terrible accident. And Cameron said, let's find a date. Just come on out. I'd love to talk about him. So he was very generous with his time.
And that warehouse we were in was pretty crazy, too.
Oh, that was amazing.
All of the props from all of these great, movies of James Cameron's past.
Oh, man. Gary Marshall told some funny stories in that. There's a lot of stuff that we couldn't use. He was so funny, man.
Yeah. There's Julianne Jordan sitting in a chair. Bear McCreary. Yep.
John Debney. I mean, what a gentleman and a real ally to this project. He really was one of the first interviews that we did that helped us kick this project off.
Yeah,
and get
first
some
composer.
momentum.
He's a wonderful guy. So is Mervyn. Mervyn just produced the new Manhattan Transfer record that's a hit. And here's Michael Dana, who was on our podcast recently. So it all ties back together.
Yeah, it was really cool of John to be not only our first composer for Score, but also our first guest on Score the Podcast.
Yeah, perfect.
You get those answers. Most directors don't know how to.
Bear was so articulate of everything. I was so surprised when we went through the footage of Bear, and he was every single thing we asked him about, he was right on point, exactly, as concisely as possible, nailing each answer. We thought, this guy's great. We got to put a lot of them in the movie, and we did.
Well, he was even just as good when you guys went on CBS This Morning. That was such a great segment.
I remember I first saw Bear's work in Battlestar Galactica. I was a fan of that original run in the mid-2000s, and I remember 2005, 2006, they were releasing his soundtracks, and the music was so experimental and different, familiar but alien, and it was just a really brilliant, talented guy, and amazing to see how his career has skyrocketed
and
since
keeps
then.
going. I mean, he's a super talented guy. Here's our first big laugh that we get in the movie.
Oh, yeah. One of the guys on top of the game saying, I have no idea what I'm doing, call someone else.
Should we be calling John Williams?
It's so perfect, and he's articulating what every composer feels, which is panic and insecurity,
self-doubt. Yeah.
He has the Mercury astronauts picture on his
I know.
on his table. Did he ever explain what that was about?
He has a lot of little trinkets that are kind of he had like a, was there like a little model truck on the ground too, like a
there's
fire
a couple
truck or something?
I'm not sure what. I think it was right after. It was probably 6 months after he had done Interstellar, so I was thinking, maybe is this some space thing that he got from some thing he did or something? But I'm not sure.
This was a cool moment.
I love
in
the
London.
sequence with
Yeah,
Rachel.
she was like, well, I haven't really started, so I can just start kind of looking around on the film. And we were like, that's great. And so we just kind of started rolling, and we hung out with Rachel for a few hours and watched her work, and
She's just wonderful, and it's the cue that she's writing is so wonderful.
And this is like
it works.
I mean, that is literally the blank page. She sat down and was like, well, I just got it. I think it was like the first time she was watching that scene. So
And the final version was quite a bit different.
Yeah.
So she made a lot of passes at that. But it's kind of cool to be really watching it there for the first time, her kind of thinking of how am I going to do this?
This was another one of our early interviews, Christoph Beck.
Mm-hmm. Close
Oh,
Encounters.
you know what I like about this? If you listen carefully, for some reason, John Debney sings it almost perfectly in tune. Either he's remembered the pitch or somebody just played it to him. But everybody is.
Actually,
There's a secret behind
You're
that.
noticing something there. I think Matt auto-tuned him in key on one of the.
Well, I didn't, but Peter did. Peter
yeah.
Bavietz, our
Oh,
who
what a
functioned
smart
basically
move.
as both our music editor and sound editor.
May I
tweaked that
simply say
slightly.
that when I first saw this edit of Score, I was so impressed by the addition of the graphic of the actual notes.
Oh yeah,
on
we
screen.
had a long
That-
back and forth
I
about
love that.
what to do with that,
I love that.
and that was Eastwood Allen,
Yeah.
out of London.
Out of London, we got in touch with him through the Kickstarter that we ran.
Shout out
and,
to Eastwood for the graphic making.
He did a great little fan
he
documentary
made-
on John Mayer that he did some cool graphics and things on, which I think is online. You can find it, but it's he said, yeah, I can animate some of this stuff and try to make
and
it look cool.
We had a conversation. So Nate, our producer cinematographer, is a musician, and he didn't. I remember him thinking he didn't know if people were going to understand or if they were. And as someone that's not a musician, I was like, I absolutely need something on the screen,
Right.
to
It's great.
signify. And once that showed up, it made so much more sense, because some of the scenes there's action going on and sound effects, and it may be hard to narrow down what you're listening for. But
Yeah, right.
This is a really wonderful sequence for so many reasons. I love it. First of all, Marco's all chill, and he says Buck is nervous. It
puts him on the spot.
Yeah.
And we didn't even mic Buck up to give his side of the story there.
A kalimba. You can
Thumb
see our
piano.
little recorder at the bottom of the screen there.
It's the same one we're using right now, isn't it?
No.
Oh no, this is the 6-track.
Now
one.
now we got the good stuff.
We upgraded.
Yeah, Buck's nervous. But this cue, I absolutely love. Sean Penn's walking across a bridge in London,
Yep.
and
It kicks in right
Yeah.
on the edits, which is a cool impact.
Oh yeah, and Peter did a cool job of like taking the room noise and then switching it to the soundtrack, the actual score when you go full frame to really
wow.
just
Yeah, I gotta say, Peter, he was nominated for a motion picture sound editor award with some other big films because of his mix for this movie, which was super cool.
Super deserved.
Wow, like what a job that Peter and Carrie Barber both did putting the sound together, because it's all over the place, man. And in these. We have sound from everything, and you can see the little portable recorders and stuff plugged in, and microphones on someone's chest, and you got to make all that stuff match. It all is a different character to that sound.
Well,
and
there's so many
he
interviews.
blended it so well.
Some of the interviews too have like little pops and hisses in them and scratches from clothing, and the way he was able to take some of that. I remember thinking like, "There's no way we can use this And then he's like, oh, yeah, you just have to identify it. And he's like scratching stuff out. And I'm like,
He's
man,
pulling up graphs and
he's amazing.
deleting, or like painting things out of the sound. I didn't know you could do that.
Oh, this interview with Robert Townsend, I believe it was in Beverly Hills, and it was like we had to park so far away and bring all the stuff through across town and up an elevator. I think that was the most difficult setup of any interview, other than going to London, of course.
Changed and would never be the same.
Robert, how often are people talking about doing like a jazzy John Barry or,
Mark Isham and I just had this conversation. He's in the middle of a new project that is going to be complete. It's the story of Buddy Bolden, who is a original trumpet player, jazz trumpet. He's doing an entire jazz score. And
cool.
I am going to see the Pink Panther live at the Hollywood Bowl. I was just invited. I can't remember which day this summer.
That scene of that old band
Probably
playing.
my favorite scene.
It's so funny.
This is my favorite music and my favorite scene and also my favorite actor. And sometimes it's a little embarrassing when I'm out and about and people say, are you James Bond? I get used to that.
You get that a lot?
I get it a lot, and I have to say,
must be frustrating.
Actually, Kraft.
The funny thing about that scene with Sean Connery driving, which I think is from Dr. No, he's on a dirt road, and the sound editor put in all these squeals on pavement, so the car's going around the corners on the dirt road.
Go ahead, John.
David Arnold. It's such an interesting role he was scored the Brosnan era and then carried over into the Daniel Craig era, and this films took such a huge tone shift. But it's interesting that the studio kept the same musical talent on board.
Yeah, and then Tom and there's a big debate now who's going to be the next James Bond composer for number. I think it's the 25th film, isn't it? Is that the next one?
25, yeah.
Oh, I had so much fun editing this scene. Or this section.
And Carrie boosted that little gunshot at the end.
Yeah.
There's a little extra sound effect in there
to really add the
Junkie XL.
It's cool how all this old stuff. I mean, this is one of the things that I was really interested in from the start. But there is that evolution in the way that artists think, because whatever they grew up listening to, there's some impression that makes, whether they want it further that idea, that musical idea, or rebel against it.
Richard Kraft, no relation. Just wanted to clear that up.
How many times have you gotten that question?
I get it. I get the question.
1,000?
I get the phone call too, which is, "Hi, Richard, listen," and someone will go on and on and on, and then I say, "Is there any money involved in this?" They say no. I said, "Okay, I'm Robert Kraft." They say yes, $25,000. They say, "Keep talking, please."
I go by Robert Richard. Just send the check. Oh yes. How often do we quote this line in our personal lives? Mystery.
Yes. Come
Stay
closer.
Something's not right here.
But please come.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
And it adds so much effect too that he's dressed in all black. He's got sunglasses on. It just really worked.
We had one of the difficult things in that interview was we used a light that it spread out, the big diffuser that spread out the light. It makes for a good looking picture, but it reflected off of his dark glasses much so in a lot of the shots of him, you see like this white beam, blinding you off of his dark glasses.
It's kind of appropriate.
Matt, one of the things that I think is most interesting and I think in many ways successful about the film was something that was already in place, before I saw the first cut that I viewed, and it's the narrative structure. And it's I think there's such a monumental task in making this movie of trying to introduce a history of the art form and then an overview of its most prominent and influential characters, and then also dive into the creative process and structure that in a way where it narratively makes sense to the audience. How hard was that for you and Kenny to play around with that structure, and how did you settle it? Did you have other ideas?
There's a few different kind of timelines that we worked with in editing originally, Kenny and I both, and we would kind of divvy it up and then retrace the other person's work and then slowly shape this big ball of clay into something that started to resemble what we were hoping it would eventually resemble. But yeah, there are a couple different timelines, and one of them was the history kind of thing. I think we put 5 sequences together of they were just history sections, and you could run them all by themselves or
in
into
a row,
each other.
yeah.
But then we also kind of wanted to parallel that with a little bit of the process of creating a film score. So we start with the idea of spotting a film before the music exists, and then a couple concepts like Tom Holkenborg here,
one of my favorite
Junkie XL.
sequences. And these forest shots are just so great.
What a great metaphor. Yeah.
It's so great. He's talking
I
about
wanted to something that just passed
Hathor.
the shot of the Psycho, that old looking shot of the person playing the violin. That's actually Dave Ewart, who's in the film. He's a violinist, and we treated the video to make it look old.
Oh,
we
that's
asked
funny.
him to play a couple things, and then it worked perfectly. So we made it look like an old clip.
I just start over collecting things again.
Oh, this is perfect.
This story's great.
Now this is upstairs at the
Mutato Musica.
Yeah,
Right.
We were downstairs when we did our podcast with
This
Mark.
bright green building along Sunset, right?
Yeah.
Looks like the Forum.
Yes.
It's a really cool building.
Mini forum.
Those glasses. We shot an interview with Mark too that none of that part ended up making the film, but the light reflecting off his glasses was brutal because those are basically mirrors, as you can see.
They're really cool glasses. He has a whole company. He sells those.
Yeah, it's kind of his
I didn't
signature.
know that. Oh, this is a beautiful piece of music that Hathor composes on the spot.
Yeah, Nate shot this part, and it was a really small little room that Hathor was in, so I shot it with my cell phone because I thought it was so cool just watching him jam. I still have that in my phone. Sometimes I go back and just watch it.
You'll be in the thing, and then all of a sudden the door will be like, that's cool, And you come back to the studio and you try to recreate that sound.
With J. Ralph, we got in a golf cart with him and drove around town. There's a little bonus clip on our YouTube.
Nice.
He has a golf cart instead of a car in New York.
Very good drummer.
What a collection of old. He makes a point to find like really old instruments that were used by sometimes famous people and bids on them.
Oh, is that right?
I think that piano belonged to somebody from like the 50s or 60s, and he bought it in an auction or something, if I remember correctly.
That's cool.
So cool.
Oh,
This
here's a
sequence.
fan favorite.
Ding, ding, bang, ding, ding, ding.
It's interesting to see all the collections of these exotic physical instruments that these composers are so attached to, and it's interesting in this digital age where anything can be synthesized or sampled that there's still such a firm commitment to the actual physical production
The
of the sound.
analog.
Thank God.
Didn't he tell a story about how the Black Sails theme that hurdy-gurdy was actually broken?
Yeah.
What was
He
the
recorded it when it was broken.
This is the biggest laugh in the movie, I think.
Right. Some little lowbrow humor in there.
For the kids.
And this seals.
If you that horn he plays right there, if you watch Last Man on Earth or any of the Philip Lord,
Oh yeah, their production company logo.
their logo is that horn.
Wow. Oh, Patrick Doyle, so wonderful. You can almost I don't think we needed subtitles for him on this. He has such a thick
We debated it. Yeah.
Scottish accent.
Yeah. Technically, it's English still, but
He was so nice too. He took us around. I think his son actually, who is also an aspiring composer or a composer, I can't remember. But that was at Shepperton Studios, which is
That's where his
that's the
studio
big
is.
the big studio in London, a big lot, and they showed us around. I think we saw the set for the live action Cinderella being built.
I went to visit
Oh.
Patrick at Shepperton once, and Pirates of the Caribbean was being shot while I was there, and I was walking down one of those narrow streets, and I was certain I was walking towards Johnny Depp, and I got really close in full on Pirates, and I realized it's his stunt double. He looked completely like
It's
him.
funny you say that because there were pirate guys walking around. I wonder if that's just a thing.
Yep.
Just
Actually,
those are the pirates.
There might be
of
real
Shepperton
pirates
Studios.
that live at Shepperton.
They took over part of it.
This is
God, I
magnificent.
love this sequence.
So cool. The drums and it's just a great filmic sequence.
At least 7 months producing.
And this music, this is a great film, but the music made this film.
Huge.
This should have
Very
gotten an
well
Oscar
edited,
nomination.
too.
I was surprised it didn't.
Well, the movie cleaned up at the Oscars. And
I know.
And then this one went past. I'm like, what?
I was thinking of going to Guitar Center to see if they had one of these.
They might make them now.
You got to get the fuel at a different
Yeah.
location.
That's right. Go to a mobile station.
Get Robert, get up into the microphone there if you can.
Okay, there's
There you
Mad
go.
Max.
These are super directional, so you gotta stay right in front of them.
Okay.
We're kind of for those that are listening to this, and we're shooting a video clip too, so we'll put something on our YouTube channel. But for those listening, we're constantly looking at a screen as we're doing this, so we're trying to consciously stay in front of the microphone too.
Tom did a good job of making a scene where we're showing a guy sitting at a computer really interesting, explaining this, and it helped with the edits too, cutting around. But the drums, the use of the drums and explaining the layers of it, it's really interesting especially for someone who doesn't know how that works.
Yeah,
and
right.
And the fact that too, people say sometimes that the stuff going digital takes away, but he actually recorded all the drums first with musicians, and then treated them. So it was still live musicians playing it. He was just able to manipulate them after they were recorded, which is cool.
Right.
I thought Steve Jablonski's sequence later in the film too was a similar kind of guy sitting at a computer that was really fascinating.
Spoiler
for me to
alert.
see.
Yep. Don't tell me how it ends, John. We're not there yet. Trevor Rabin, who's known,
Big
I think,
look at the camera when he says,
right.
Oh, she's so great. She's so interesting.
I'm really loving her segment.
How'd you find Sue Lantan?
We did a lot of research to try to identify who are the leading people, because this is like, we thought film music has got to be used for some scientific something. It's such a huge art form. There must be some analysis being done on how some of this stuff works, with people watching films. And she's one of the leading people that have been studying this. It's the music of multimedia. And the way that plays off of what we see.
Famous Goosebumps.
Whose arm is that? Is that Crystal's? Our producer?
One of our producers.
Assistant producer?
And how did you give Crystal the goosebumps?
I don't think we're allowed to
She's
say.
my wife now, so there's no...
Oh, boy.
You're never
this
going
is
to know.
how'd you get that past the ratings board, that one scene, that kiss?
Yeah, that
we went
changed
through
everything.
we went through several
PG-13.
varieties of that. That's Nate Gold's doing right there, that little shot. We had a few variations. This was the most G-rated.
I really liked the animation, by the way.
Same.
It was instrumental in explaining that.
Mobius.
Kyle Goodrich is the one that did a lot of those animations.
Do you notice the little
3D.
picture of Moby over his shoulder? I always notice it. There's a
that's funny.
drawing of him right over his right shoulder.
Oh, yeah.
Which is also his autograph, his signature is a little self-portrait.
Yeah.
I like that he's wearing a hoodie that says Mr. Baldy.
No, it's Mount Baldy.
Oh, did you say Mount Baldy? I said Mr. Baldy.
I thought it was too.
No,
Okay, I'll go with Mount Baldy.
He might be Mr. Baldy, but he probably climbs Mount Baldy.
Yes.
I thought the same thing when I first saw that. I said, is he wearing is that his brand or something?
Mr. Baldy.
Great James Horner score.
Yeah.
Makes people cry.
I wish James Horner did so many great scores, and it would have been nice if we, for time purposes, we couldn't go that in depth on a number of things. But he's one of those guys that has so many great scores through the years. It would have been nice to have a little bit more in there if people could sit through a 4-hour cut of the movie.
Yeah.
Which we've heard some people
Score
would.
2.
Right.
Number of composers. Of course, we've all heard from a lot of the fans, why didn't you include, and then you can fill in the
Right.
blank of,
Yep.
you should have had something, to which you always have to say, you're absolutely right. It
Yep.
just is a question of, should we make a movie that's a day and a half long, or something that gives you the flavor?
Yep.
Well, and I think we interviewed 60-something people and included them all. So at a certain point, people are like, how come you didn't interview? And it's like, well, if you interviewed every composer in existence, we'd definitely run out of time in the day.
Yeah.
But it would have been great to include. There's so many people that were omitted for time purposes or scheduling.
I'm a big documentary consumer, and I was really nervous about all the people that we interviewed for this and squeezing them in, because usually you don't have that in a documentary, that many people. You might have 20 maybe, but like we crammed a lot of these.
Oh, this is the part.
And it kind of worked.
This is so great.
Is this where he looks at the camera? Yeah.
You know what's interesting?
Wish I would have asked first.
I don't think I'm not sure he purposely looked into a camera. We had so many cameras on him that he happened to just look that direction, and when we were editing it, we found it very humorous that he happened to look right into a lens right at that.
Our setup for that,
I thought
that
he was
our
kind of saying, "Is this okay for me to say?"
It felt that
happy.
way, and I think that's kind of what he meant. But yeah, we just happened to have a camera there that I think maybe caught his eye,
which created a laugh in the theater quite often.
The power of the score in and of itself is amazing.
And that score, I heard it the other day too, on some sporting event. I can't remember what it was, but that Trevor's score for "Remember the Titans."
And even though we feel like we have full control and freedom of where to.
So this is part of. There were so many good moments that I think we spent like 3 hours or something with Sulan in Kalamazoo, Michigan, and we flew up there, and she's at Kalamazoo College, and she gave us all of these fantastic anecdotes about different movies, about some different studies that have been done, and we've talked about some of those throughout our tour of the movie at screenings and Q&As and things like that. But she was talking about how the music will tie itself to something visual, and you start to, as a viewer, you start to make that connection with things, so that when you hear music doing something later in the movie, you're gonna fall. The music rises, and you're looking for something on the screen that also rises at the same time, and you make that mental, kind of that psychology framework is there.
Well, she mentioned too that when you go to the theater, there aren't speakers on every mouth moving. The speakers are in the same spot, and your eyes and brain do the work of figuring out where the sound is coming from. So your brain is used to looking for where the sound is coming from all the way back to from when you were like a baby. Mm-hmm. She explained that. She was definitely my favorite at any Q&A we did, that she was there. I wanted to ask questions just like the audience.
A significant day for me with Quincy, because not only was he is my hero in so many ways, but we had a conversation that day that led to a whole new exploration for me of a different topic and a different movie idea. And here's my favorite movie. It started there.
Was that?
Well, I'd floated around. I mean, I'd had the idea for years and years and years, but this was the first time I'd actually had a chance to say to Quincy. He said to me, "What else are you working on?" I said, "Well, I'm actually trying to develop this project that you're a character in." And he said, "I love it. Let's do it together."
Are you about to break some news on what you're working on? Or?
No, I have to wait one.
Breaking news.
We can't tease listeners like this with this
spoiler alert. It has to do with Charlton Heston, Jerry Goldsmith, and
does it?
And Star Trek. The one reference we got to Star Trek music at this entire project, we did a whole sequence on Jerry Goldsmith.
John hates us for that.
Yeah.
This was my one sore point. Everyone has their one thing when they come up to us and say, "Why didn't you guys include this?" And that's my one.
Where was the Star Trek theme?
There's also a shot of a mixing bowl, which I feel is a critical, dramatic moment in the film.
I don't know where you discovered that, but in the edit, I remember thinking, man, it would be so cool to have the visual of somebody hitting and then Matt's like, "Oh, here's the mixing bowl clip." I'm like, "Oh,
it was cool."
Great.
Yeah, it was in some old archival footage of, I think it might have been a featurette that was done.
Does he say balls in this clip too?
He brought that up to us.
Yes,
that was. We went to that. Robert, I think
favorites.
You moderated that. And that was the first thing he said is, "Do I really say that?"
Yes,
twice in the movie. I'm sorry, Tyler.
Well, didn't we bring up too that in the Deadpool 2 soundtrack, one of the titles has balls in it, and we're like,
right,
use it in a title.
What was that title? Do you remember that?
A chorus.
It's holy.
I remember
balls.
Yeah.
Okay, yes.
For
I think it might be the track that got him the first explicit soundtrack.
Yeah, it was.
Yes.
Or score, excuse me.
Such great filmmaking. I mean, we're so. I mean, Jerry.
We've seen this so many times that even it's like its own musical thing.
Matt,
Now
it
even
is.
the delivery, we
Matt,
hear the tone.
when we were editing this, did you have fun just watching through all these movies that you maybe had never seen or seen once in your
I'd
childhood?
never seen The Reavers before until I came across that clip of Steven Spielberg talking about hearing this guy's score and thinking he's 80 years old, and realizing it was John Williams, who, I don't know what his age is here. I think he's 48 or something in this clip, or I don't know. He's younger than 80 years old, but it was really interesting. Just a little bit of that backstory into how Steven Spielberg, one of the most iconic duos, probably the iconic duo, Steven Spielberg and John Williams, and how they met.
And that little moment there, that was always a big laugh.
Which one?
Or I think it's coming up actually when they talk about Jaws.
Oh, this is all great. Actually, also at the Hollywood Bowl this summer, I'm going to see Jaws perform live to picture, which will be a lot.
It's
of
really
fun.
cool, yeah. If you can, a lot of local orchestras. We've talked about this on Score the Podcast, but a lot of local orchestras are doing those now. So if there's one in your area, go out, support them, and you'll really enjoy the experience.
It's
of seeing
amazing
them.
too.
And someone should do a live outdoor Jaws rendition in a pool. Like a dive-in movie.
Right, great. What's fun about this sequence is that everybody misquotes.
Oh,
the
look at that!
actual
See that
piece
in the
of music.
background? That
Right.
light. That was a really small room, and the backlight is actually in the background with the gel on the light. It's so embarrassing. I hate watching that part.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It's just real embarrassing.
You actually can't notice though, because Richard has a collection of a lot of colorful stuff, so it actually just looks like a lamp from Disney.
Yeah, I
something.
was
Just
distracted
assumed he
by
had hue bulbs and was, intentionally accenting his,
that
his
would
office.
make it so much easier.
Oh, this is the part. This is a serious movie.
I'm only kidding, and here's
Here's a very
The other
poetic
thing about that
pastoral.
Richard Kraft interview, he's got a mermaid staring right at us in the background. So I never. That's the first thing
Is
I
that
look at.
Is that a Little Mermaid, or is it something else?
I'm not sure.
He's notably a major Disney collector. If you
Correct.
don't know that,
Yep.
so there's his
a
studio,
collector of lots of stuff.
his
not
office,
just Disney.
and
I wouldn't be surprised if that's something straight from Disneyland.
Yeah, he has a ton of stuff, which is why he's doing all these concerts now, and probably in like a kid in a candy store.
Amazing orchestral symphonic.
So many cool tidbits of that Hans Zimmer shared here, but then just Matt and Kenny hearing your behind the scenes stories of some of the things that you saw.
This is
Hey,
actually
this guy.
the most dramatic moment in the movie.
It's really
Emotional
the pivotal-
anchor of the film.
Now we're selling tickets. I mean,
We're not worthy.
casting. That's what they say.
I was worried that we held on that too long, but I think it worked. It's crazy that the music has made that yellow text, like the most ordinary thing you could put in a movie, has made that yellow text so iconic.
Iconic for anything. You can put any word in that. Look at that.
And to this day, when a Star Wars movie comes out, Hollywood Boulevard looks exactly the same. The Chinese theater, people outside with their shirts. Yeah. It's great.
They had the Millennium Falcon there just for
Yeah,
the
they
last
have
Solo movie.
Huge ships out there and Chewbacca running around.
Of course, they
That's so. I just
usually have that
realized
out there.
for almost everyone at this table except me, I actually saw Star Wars the week it opened in New York City. All of you saw it probably for the first time on a small screen, correct? Did you see it as like a video or a
Yeah,
or a
VHS.
DVD?
4x3,
Right.
yeah.
I went to the Ziegfeld with a guy I was working with, told me about the movie. We got to see this movie. And we went to 6th Avenue and 54th Street. And I didn't know exactly what it was. And, of course, it was amazing. But
It's amazing.
it's amazing.
Do you remember your initial impact when Star Wars came out? What were you thinking leaving the theater?
Well, I remember first of all, I was with a super cool guy that worked at the radio station I was working at. I was trying to be a songwriter, but I had a job at a radio station in New York City. And we were kind of high-fiving each other like, man, I don't think either one of us knew what to expect.
Yeah.
He was a guy that was super plugged into pop culture, and I wasn't at that time. And he said, there's this movie we got to see tonight after work. And we were working on 124th Street in Riverside, and we came downtown to see this movie at the Ziegfeld, and I didn't know what to expect.
Just a game changer.
Total.
From what you were used to seeing.
I think one of the most surprising things was how hard it was to get a seat in the theater. I didn't realize it was such an event.
Did it take a little while for the hype to build, or on the opening day, do you think it was
pretty
like
big
that?
immediately.
It was a big, like...
I think Hollywood had...
There was expectations.
Jaws broke open the idea of the blockbuster at that scale. Plus, as we know in now film history, Star Wars wasn't just opening on a few theater screens in major cities. It was opening on 2,800 screens or whatever it was.
Yeah.
That the movie theater, the studios, had realized that you go super wide on a movie.
Yeah.
You're generating a blockbuster. You're creating something. So it was national news.
They didn't realize until after the cut was done and they saw what they had, right? And wasn't there internal skepticism around the project?
Maybe, probably like all of them. I mean, there was internal skepticism certainly about the sale of the project. Nobody wanted it. And Alan Ladd at 20th Century Fox said, we'll do it. I guess the guy George Lucas really wants something to be held back. He wants sequel and merchandising rights. He wants to retain them. Who's ever going to make a sequel to this, first of all, and merchandising rights for a science fiction movie?
Could you imagine if he sold it right away and didn't do that?
He wouldn't.
My God.
He wouldn't make the deal without holding those back. And Alan Ladd said, "Fine, it's like a science fiction kind of western.
Yeah, who cares?
It's
about
a
that
one-off.
stuff?
I'm being told the guy's a talented filmmaker. We'll do other stuff with him. So let's do it." P.S. $1 billion in T-shirts.
And then I think the reason there was that 10-year gap between, there was kind of this dark period in the early 90s before the movies got re-released, and then there were the special editions, and I think a lot of that was Lucas's strategy to get his Kenner license to lapse, because Kenner was getting such a sweetheart deal on their licensing, and by kind of letting Star Wars fizzle out in the market, they failed to meet their minimum guarantees, lost interest, let it lapse. Then they were able to do the special editions, relicense everything to Kenner at 5 times the cost, and then Hasbro bought them. And
isn't it crazy how John Williams, how many unbelievable themes are attached to him?
Genius composer and deserving of every accolade.
It's so incredible, just one after another. And there's so many that aren't in this that could have been.
Yeah, there really are.
This is a great moment when Brian...
when he explains...
does it without music.
Yeah, when he says you can recognize it by the notes or the rhythm.
Yep.
So, what a short list of artists, I think, that have produced something that's such a globally shared cultural experience. You can go to China or Europe or Latin America, any country in the world, and people know John Williams' music and can hum along to this. And I think it's a very rare...
Look what it does, too. Like, if you go to Disneyland and walk around... and you hear that music playing, like the experience of being at Disneyland would be so much different without music playing from the movies. Like, it creates an atmosphere that you're always in it, even if you're walking by a shop and you're not actually on a ride or something. It just really brings you into the world of wherever, whatever ride you're going on.
But I think it's also wonderful. We're looking at this scene here of the two greatest artists in their respective fields.
Yeah.
And did they, as can sometimes happen, they brought out probably greatness in each other.
Well, certainly it takes a director with some musical expectation to leave the space for a composer to be able to create.
Absolutely right.
So there's, and it's hard to work the other way around. I know Steven Spielberg's been known to give John a little extra, space here and there when John asks for it, but he usually has a really good sense in the first place of how the music will work that works just so perfectly with what John Williams can do.
You really get a sense that they also have such, I'm just guessing, but such respect for each other, that traditional friction that might be between a director and a composer over many years, and sometimes it's hard to continue those relationships.
Yeah.
It feels like they've just really found a way to work together beautifully.
I don't think this ended up in the film, but wasn't that shot, that iconic Amblin Entertainment shot of flying over the moon from E.T.,
Yep.
wasn't that added specifically because Williams needed an extra space for the music?
There are a handful of versions of the story, but yeah, essentially he either opened up some more space for John to be able to really, embrace that theme at that point in the movie, or he put the whole shot in. One of those. He put something in, whether it's a few seconds or several shots.
This is that dog shot. It's so
Oh,
good. I
it's
mean,
so
how many
great.
takes? The dog looks so excited. He takes a little step. And
Yeah,
pulls
it's
him
just
back.
great.
What a moment.
That dog, we had to work with that dog for years.
That was in your dog training.
Dog training.
Hollywood dog trainers.
That
Robert
was-
Kraft.
Not Richard, Robert. Actually, Richard's the dog trainer if you want to. It just makes more sense.
This was a cool. So this scene came together fairly late in our production process after we interviewed her. It was one of the things that she was really articulate about, this ending of E.T., which is just the best, in my opinion. It's the best musical ending of a movie that has ever been done, and it's so great because it's this is what's it, 25 years old, 30 years, 1982, right? Yeah. So older than that, and but it
35.
This just works.
Drew
so well.
Barrymore as a little girl, so cute.
And the ending of this, just the music just pulls, the energy right out of you as you're watching it, which is just such a, I don't know what it is, but you actually feel the physical sensation of the music drawing that energy, which is so cool.
It actually made editing a little difficult on some of this section because, some of the cues you're able to weave in and out of, but John Williams, each cue has such an impact and an ending that we had to just go to black on some of those and just let the music end because you just can't weave out of that. And so sometimes I felt like, oh, does it feel like the John Williams section is over because we went to black and there was a big triumphant ending? But it's like, nope, here comes Jurassic Park.
A really cool thing is Steve Rodoti here is a studio musician, and he's
like the captain.
He is.
Yeah. And Dave, you were too, but
Well, Bruce Dukoff is usually the true captain of the orchestra.
Yep, who violinist.
First violin. But Erdoti's definitely the cello master.
It's cool, these people that are working on all these scores too, because just you would imagine being in the room playing these now famous musical pieces that are going to live for forever, and like they're the privileged few that get to be the first to hear it and the first to play it together.
Yeah.
It's one of my favorite studios in the world, Air Studios.
It was so cool in there.
Just a wonderful place, and I've spent many quality hours in there.
There are rumors that it's haunted, Robert.
I love that. See the chairs moving just by itself. That proves it.
This part coming up is another thing we quoted quite a bit. Usually me.
Are always based on people. Usually me.
Usually me.
Right.
Oh, this scene right here, Nate was backpedaling and ran right into the wall.
Oh,
and we had to
see how the doors open there. I don't think that the doors didn't open, or he was crooked.
It only opens to a certain point, and Nate
a
in a
feeling
full
in that.
speed backpedal slammed.
It was a
into the
good take
wall.
too.
It was funny.
That room is really beautiful, and it's just Hans recorded a lot of music in that balcony for Interstellar.
Oh,
yeah.
He did a whole series of.
Why so the orchestra was in the balcony, or he was in the balcony?
I'm sorry for Inception.
Oh, good. Yeah.
Not Interstellar. Inception. Yes, he recorded. The musicians were up there. I just know that there's a story of him using trombones recorded up there and reversing it and doing funny stuff.
Specific acoustic effect being in that location. Interesting.
This was quite a find here, Matt. I remember when we were shooting at Air and thinking, man, I wish they were doing a session so we could get some video.
Yeah.
And Matt,
this is our cell phone video.
Yeah,
here.
somebody shot this on a cell phone during the Casino Royale recording.
Oh, it's
and,
great stuff.
It just happened to be like such a great scene for music.
Perfect split screen.
In all its 240i resolution glory.
Well, and Matt came up with the idea to do this split screen, which not only is a really cool effect, but it also makes the cell phone video look so
Correct.
ratty.
Shrinks it a little bit.
You can make it a little smaller. Although I wish they didn't have that cello case or whatever that is.
No, that's an artistic depth. The guy knew what he was doing.
It's actually a very impressive cell phone video for something shot in 2005.
Yeah.
On a BlackBerry.
It's probably like a Palm Trio.
I'm also
600.
impressed by Daniel Craig's driving ability. I mean, he turned that. It's hard to do, get that truck not to blow up into the plane.
He must have a Class
That's why
C.
they pay Daniel the big
I would
bucks.
think so. Class C license.
At least.
Oh, Abbey Road. We tried to do the famous shot. I'll tell you what, if you haven't been there, it's so hard to get that shot because the locals are so aggressive driving through that crosswalk that if you're not crossing, they're not waiting.
Yeah.
But so many people try to do it. Oh, yes, and this is the upstairs part.
Right,
where,
the upstairs where Robert Kraft naps.
Yes.
That's one of my favorite
and
places
where Kenny
nap.
and Nate plugged in a transformer and knocked the power out right before the
Nice.
session started.
That's good.
Whoops. Sorry, Abbey Road
For those of you
Studios.
Abbey Road fans, this entire sequence takes place in Abbey 1, which you're looking at on screen, which is the huge room.
That's the big stage there, right?
If you walk out, that's the big stage and one of the biggest stages in the world with one of the longest echoes. Often debated whether Abbey Road or the Sony studio in Culver City has a longer echo.
Uh-huh.
And Fox Studios also is in there. But across, if you're looking at John Williams here, on his right side, there's a door that takes you across the little hallway into Abbey Road 2.
That's the Beatles studio,
That's the
right?
Beatles room where they, by the end of the Beatles recording sessions, the story is that they divided the room up into quarters. So George was in one quarter with some incense and he was meditating, and John and Yoko were in another quarter with a mattress, and so there's stories that they had all camped out
These are
there,
all
but
true
they
stories,
were
I'm sure.
divided up. But it's a different room. And
Oh, here's our Bryan Cranston lookalike that we always point out. He's in
on
the
the shot, you'll see top right.
in the sweater.
Not all right. Well, there.
Bottom right.
Bottom right.
interesting.
There was a lot of Breaking Bad going on during the editing process. So.
This is such a great score. This Mission Impossible Rogue Nation score by Joe Kramer. We were really, he hadn't done a Mission Impossible movie before and came into this one, and it's I think it's the best music of the whole series. I mean, which is blasphemy to some extent if you go back to the old series, but it was all derived from that classic Mission Impossible theme, and you can really hear it when you're watching the whole movie.
I'm a huge fan of this franchise, and I'd absolutely agree. Strongest score in the franchise yet.
Mm-hmm.
When we shot this scene, we had plans to shoot for a couple hours, and out of nowhere, Chris Martin from Coldplay showed up and wanted to sit in on the recording, and they didn't want cameras in the booth, so we went from having a couple hours to about 13 minutes to shoot the whole scene. So I don't think we left out literally a frame of video. We used everything we shot here, and we were able to come up with something that worked and we were happy with. But I remember being very nervous when we were told that our time was significantly cut short.
Yeah. Wasn't Simon Pegg there too?
Yeah. And Seth MacFarlane, we saw him in the hall. He was recording an album around the corner.
A solo out, like one of his jazz.
I think one of his jazz albums or
yeah.
something. Yeah, but he was there that day too, and
that's cool.
I made a point to buy a ton of stuff in the
gift shop,
little gift shop, and the gift shops. I don't think it's open to the public, so the guy that was working in the gift shop was really happy that someone came in there, because I don't think people that go there all the time buy stuff.
Chris Martin's not going to go buy a Abbey
But I was
Road
like, hi,
mug.
I'll take a book and the mugs. And he was like, you don't belong here? Great. Makes sense.
Yeah, it is kind of amazing. I mean, some of these shots are a little bit shaky, but for the amount of time that we had there, it was perfect. Like, we could have reshot maybe a couple things, but But luckily, we had several people with cameras that were recording at the same time, and we were able to gather everything in a very short amount of time. And that was a really good cue that they played.
Yeah,
too.
it was perfect timing for everything. Like,
'Cause
it could have been
sometimes-
some background noise, or more simple, not such a powerful cue playing.
Now we're at Fox here.
Has anyone leaked Desplat's original Rogue One score?
I don't think so. I don't know that it was ever finished either. Like, I don't know if they recorded that or if it was just it was just a mocked up electronic something version in Logic or something. I think he does a lot by pen and paper actually. So I'm not sure what came of that. I'm sure Disney has it somewhere.
There's so many famously replaced scores throughout history. It'd be interesting to.
Is there a nicer guy than Heitor Pereira?
Yeah.
He's such a cool guy. And he's so musical. He's somebody who always wants to be playing something. When we were interviewing him, he kept going like, "Oh, let me show you." And he'd grab an instrument and play it instead of just talking about it.
Yeah.
He loves playing. And
You know what was interesting about Heitor, too? The way that he writes a melody in the first place is with a guitar.
Yeah,
like
instead of a
he's
piano.
most comfortable with the guitar being an extension of his ability to play.
Well, wasn't he in
notes,
a South American band, a Brazilian band or something?
He's done a lot. Yeah, he's done a lot of stuff.
Heitor was in Simply Red for many years as the musical director and guitarist.
Okay,
there you
go.
go.
He's a great guitar player.
Yeah, he is.
A genuine rock star who came over.
I don't know who captured this shot right here, but it is amazing. Every time I see it, the rack focus to the minion.
I believe this was Alex Miskey who was running the camera on this, who also captured later on that moment where Heitor's kind of instructing the orchestra on how to pluck at, or not even pluck, kind of strum
with the nails,
the strings with the back of the nail.
For the film.
For the film.
All right, Warner Brothers here. So
I shot this.
Robert, there's like 3 main stages in L.A.
You're correct.
Warner Brothers, Sony, which we don't have in the movie, and Fox, right?
Yep. And they all have their fans, and they all have incredible histories. Incredible histories in all. John Williams prefers Sony when he's scoring here. A number of composers only record at Fox.
Yep.
Which has been in existence since the beginning of sound on film. It was stage 1 on the Fox movie studio. And
Alfred Newman.
Right, and music, the sound came in 1927 with the jazz singer. That was the first movie released with sound, but Fox had already figured out how to get sound onto film. They just didn't make it to the theater in time. So the jazz singer is credited as the first sound movie, but they dropped the microphone into a, movie studio.
Yeah.
And recorded an orchestra in there, and then it just evolved into that's where the recording studio became.
Oh, this is another moment of being in the recording session when they were playing something epic, and we've gotten a lot of questions about what this cue is because it was never released. It's in the film that it's
not
being
on the soundtrack, not on the score.
It's for Spongebob 2, Sponge Out of Water, and in my opinion,
the classic film.
It's almost it's wasted. It's such a cool cue, and it's just barely used in the background of a moment in that film.
Yeah,
and
I believe that was either the first or second piece of music that they played when we first got there, and that was the first
Bruce
scoring session we went to. Oh yeah, there's Bruce,
and I believe Katya Popoff on the right there.
And these are that's the score there by Heitor, so we're kind of jumping around. Hopefully the people watching aren't.
We needed a
paying
shot there.
that close of attention. We needed some sheet music there.
We needed a sheet music shot.
Conrad Pope, who's a orchestrator, best known for working with John Williams and Alexander Desplat, and
reminds me of Kelsey Grammer in that shot. A little bit.
There's a little bit of that, maybe. The chorusing effect here.
Everything was consonant.
That was from Up on a Ladder. That was way up on a ladder. We shot down to get that angle above the string section.
Trivia buffs.
I love this line.
It's just
about the little imperfections in the music.
Yeah. Humanity.
So eloquent, that Brian Tyler.
Yes.
90 musicians.
This is my favorite part.
Oh yeah, here's the piece of music that I think was one of the first ones that we captured. You can see actually on the screen, a couple frames, you can see the Patrick Star or whatever from SpongeBob, I think.
Oh yeah. We kind of made it a joke. A lot of people were like, what cue is this? And we kind of just left it as a mystery to see if anyone could figure it out. And I think one person ended up tweeting us, and they had figured it out somehow. And it was like the world's biggest SpongeBob SquarePants fan from like Florida.
It was SpongeBob, actually.
It was Bob. Yeah, it was Sponge Robert.
It's his family name.
It really is a really good piece of music.
It's so hard to compose this kind of music. That's what always kills me is we hear this music and we think, oh, this is really cool. It's hard to make this kind of music. It's hard to get these emotions into a 100-piece orchestra.
Yeah.
It's a really incredible art form.
When
I have to wonder why Debney didn't hold that piece back for something other than the SpongeBob movie.
I mean, he writes so much stuff, so I'm sure he has no shortage of musical ideas for a lot of. I mean,
when
guys made some great scores.
When John says it's like seeing your child for the first time being born. By chance, randomly, I met John's son. And I was like, "You're the child. That's
Right.
You're the child that was born that he's referencing." And he's like, "What?"
What creep?
It was funny to me, but he didn't know what I was talking about.
You're the child.
All these years.
Elliot Goldenthal, we met him at a hotel. I think was at the W Hotel or Beverly. I don't know. It was some hotel in Beverly Hills.
It was bougie.
He was in town because he usually lives in New York, but he came down. He was accepting an award for something, Lifetime Achievement or something, and we were fortunate enough to interview him right before that. It was the same day.
I love his Batman Forever soundtrack, even though the movie was kind of... It's such a cool soundtrack and such a different Batman sound. I thought it was really cool.
Do you know how much you have to make?
Mitchell Lee was such a great interview.
Oh, man. Soundbite machine. And he's just like the animated hands. He's like
Disney.
He's Disney. He's animated.
Has brought a complexity to the art form.
And he's right. You know, I've been paying attention to all these Disney releases, and like each one of them, I never really thought about it because you know you got movies coming out all the time from whatever studios, but the Disney ones, they throw so much into every single movie.
Oh, the countdown clock. He mentioned this in the interview, and we were like, "Do you have that?" And he's like, "No, I don't know where it is." And so we packed everything up, and then right before we left, he's like, "I remember where the clock is. I'll be right back."
Yeah.
And so we grabbed it. So that shot was kind of like last second.
Great.
Yeah.
This kind of situation is so expensive.
Back in Studio One here.
But there's always more than one way to solve a problem.
More footage from our limited shoot.
This is a great sequence.
When they were scoring this part,
Split screen is very cool.
when they were scoring this part, that scene was all animated. The Tom Cruise in the water, it hadn't been shot yet. So on the screen, they were seeing a concept version.
Art, yeah. Was it actually hand-drawn art?
No,
or
it was
like
an
animatic?
animated. It looked like a video game.
Over the decades, they've asked for different things. And
John Burlingame, who's the best at what he does as a film music historian. We met him down at USC, and because he teaches a couple classes there, and USC is known for their, they have a lot of composers have ties to USC, so he fit in perfectly with Danny Elfman.
One of my great regrets of this film, and I know we had explored it, is that Laura Engel, who is really responsible in some ways for bringing Danny Elfman to a lot of the glory that he's had. She was the road manager for Oingo Boingo.
Yeah.
And then worked with him as a manager, and then he was really part of his transition to film music, and she should be on camera. Next
We
one,
almost
Score
did.
2.
We had put a lot of the film together, and she actually, we reached out to interview her, and we're waiting for the ideal time to do that. And we realized at some point, you know what? We have a lot of the stuff that's working really well. We never ended up going back to shoot more interviews after that.
She'll be part of our sequel.
Yeah, there you go.
It was, just the antics of Oingo Boingo, and then the whole Tim Burton, Pee-wee.
Steve Bartek on the left there playing guitar. He's very involved in Danny's music.
Mm-hmm.
This
gets a laugh.
Comedy.
He grabs you by the collar in the title of a movie and says,
I'm about.
Funny to mention that I forget who told me this, but Paul Rubin, Pee-wee, saw the film on an airplane.
Oh wow!
And
saw a score on that.
I think Richard Kraft told me that.
Yeah.
And he was like, "How cool is this?" And I think he took a picture on the plane and sent it because the
That's
film
awesome.
was on some JetBlue and Delta flights.
Right.
It might still be there, but it was there.
It's
for a
still
while.
on, I think, Lufthansa, because somebody sent me a week ago.
Oh.
Look what's on the back of the seat in front of me.
That's cool. Yeah.
I haven't been on a flight when it's on there, unfortunately. I'd be like, what's this movie, everyone? Interesting.
Have you heard of this?
A score? It's some sort of a documentary about film.
The pilot has an announcement. Passengers, all of you tune immediately to channel 22.
Oh, yes.
Kenny's favorite score.
My favorite score. I actually just bought, because it's not really easy to find, I bought a used vinyl of this soundtrack original. And it wasn't cheap, but it was worth it.
Amazing.
You got quite a growing vinyl collection.
I noticed that.
His sound, his personality.
Yes.
This is quite a work of art.
This is a great. I've rewatched this several times, and it's just recently started to age a little bit. The movie, in that it feels a little bit because it's such a great movie that has lasted for so long. Just barely starting to kind of feel a little bit older. The filmmaking's the pace is a little slower, and but it's a really it's like such a great movie and such an inventive movie.
Frank Darabont is such a master filmmaker. I wish he'd do more.
Mm-hmm.
Love this cue.
Extremely edgy and unique, and he has a unmistakable mark.
Robert, you've worked with Thomas Newman before, right? On a couple films. Do you remember the first film you worked with him on?
Well, really, the only one that we were working on that was a Fox film was Road to Perdition.
Yeah. Oh, that's a great score.
It's one of my favorite scores ever, and I don't ever know whether it's because I was part of seeing it or it's just genuinely one of the great scores. But it is a great score. That score thrills me. This movie, American Beauty, and we actually have it in our film here coming up. Maybe my top 3 favorite cues in any movie is the plastic bag scene in American Beauty. The definition for me of kind of a melancholy that Thomas Newman certainly captures here, but that's a really amazing piece of music.
I remember, I hope I'm not revealing too much about the first time I watched the movie through with our composer, Ryan Taubert, who did a fantastic job on a couple pieces of music. And, we had a whole conversation about, he was like, oh, so you want the music to come right after the John Williams cue then? So you want me to follow John Williams? Like, oh, sorry, Ryan.
No
but
pressure.
but he did an excellent job with this. He had never seen American Beauty before.
Oh, wow.
And so he watched this and he was like, that's a pretty dramatic plastic bag.
I think this whole sequence the layers of this sequence are incredible, including how did you get the bag to stay in the frame? I mean, it's really...
Well, and that's amateur filmmaking right there, right?
Yeah.
Somebody shot that. That's just him, the actor, shooting that, I think. That's at least what the story's telling.
Right.
But what a...
I wonder if it's tied to a fishing line and they're just swirling it around.
Oh, that's really interesting.
I'll bet they just had a couple big industrial fans. that
Wind
kinda-
machine?
Yeah, must have been. John Powell.
The great, the legend, and there's Alfred Newman. I have that photograph.
Robert, get right up into that microphone
I have
there.
that photograph in my house, that one right there, of Alfred Newman, the father of modern film composing, he's called.
Here's one of the opening shots of Finding
Nemo.
Nemo. You can
Such
see
a
the
sensitive and beautiful cue.
A prevailing mood.
Bridge of Spies. I think he was doing Bridge of Spies when we were finishing the film. We were real excited to see what that would sound like because it was the first score in a while that Spielberg did not work with John Williams.
I think it was the first one.
Well, Color Purple he did with Quincy.
Oh, that's right.
I think
but that
might have been the only
There's
one,
only
though.
3.
Yeah, and then more recently, Alan Silvestri on Ready Player One. But we were really excited to see how Thomas Newman would do on Bridge of Spies, and the music for that was it did not disappoint. I think it was nominated for an Academy Award.
I loved that movie, but I'm a huge Tom Hanks
Trying to
fan,
figure
so-
his button out.
I know.
Not entirely sure.
I'm not sure either.
He has a collection. All those toys on his desk, they're glued on, if I remember correctly, so
Nice.
he doesn't bump it. But
Right.
then we started having the conversation. What happens if he moves? What a pain.
You have to airlift that desk out.
Hadn't he just moved when?
Yeah,
when
I
we
think
interviewed him?
so. He was unpacking some things. So
this.
I think so. Either that
Oh,
or
yeah.
it was his collection of action figures from somewhere else that he was moving in.
I didn't know this, and I think a lot of the
Trevor
people who
Horn.
watched this movie felt the same way because we got a lot of reaction from this.
Hans.
Did you know
Maybe
that,
Hans.
Matt? That he was in the Buggles?
I had come across that before.
The guy playing the bass right there is Trevor Horn, the great record producer of Yes and Frankie Goes to Hollywood.
He's
and
composed a
Seal.
few scores too, right?
Yeah, he's worked on movie music.
Gladiator, one of those scores.
I could
that
see
will,
this movie again. This is so good.
There's a brutality about the way that the orchestra plays. There's a violence, if you will.
Yeah, it's one of my favorite. It's my favorite Ridley Scott movie for sure. The Martian was pretty close too, though. The Martian was a great film.
Alien? No.
And well, yeah, that too. Well, there's a lot. It's Ridley Scott. Oh, he has a bunch of movies that are fantastic.
The single female voice of Lisa.
I cried at that part. Not in our film.
I'm glad we got the little Lisa Gerrard bit in there. I mean, this really kicked off such a huge trend in music toward those kind of ethereal, otherworldly vocals.
Yeah. And she's scored a few films, I think, since then too. And isn't she going on tour?
Yeah, she's on the World of Hans Zimmer tour that he's now, I guess, licensed out to that orchestra.
It's touring without him, but playing all these themes.
I wonder if they got the Lion King singers to do it too, because that was such a cool part in the Hans tour.
Zimmer Live, which you could see on Netflix.
Oh, here's what you're talking about, Robert.
Yep.
Hand on the wheat field.
Hans Zimmer's voice was tricky for us. He has such a deep voice. Maybe even deeper than your voice, Robert.
Do you think?
Oh, maybe not. But
Yeah, again, Peter made it so you could actually understand him.
Yeah,
I remember the first cuts we were watching on my home theater system.
Yeah.
You couldn't even understand Hans Zimmer in the cuts because
Yeah,
it was
so
all low
bassy.
end.
Now we're in the Hans Zimmer era. It just looms over everything.
I love that tilting up shot of the Colosseum.
This is why he's a revolutionary. Hans took the strings.
And this keyboard, you'll see. Some people have commented about this before, but he squeezed the keyboard onto the desk or into the desk in some little
It's like
compartment
dismantled,
there.
isn't it?
So yeah, he took the end of it off. You can see the machinery on the edge of the keys. You'll see it, I think, coming up when we show the other side of the keyboard. Kenny, you cut together this Pirates montage here.
Yeah,
Very
it's-
artfully done with the
there's a-
moon. It turns to nighttime.
Yeah, thank you. This is coming up as my favorite transition of all the music. I was able to use a clip.
I know what you're talking about.
It was
Oh,
like,
great
excuse
cue.
me really quick. The Batmobile's here now.
Dark Knight is obviously blur this line between
This cue really says a lot to me. The rhythm under the Batmobiles.
The sort of light, repetitive.
I remember seeing this in theaters the first time and just my adrenaline and heart pumping. And I know you mentioned E.T. being such an effective musical ending, but I think this has to rival it.
Oh, yeah, it's up
that
there.
high when you leave the theater. It's so driven by the music here.
All about this constant pulse going.
It is kind of amazing the impact that movie had in 2008 when that came out. And of course, huge block. Everybody knew it was going to be a huge movie no matter what, even if it sucked, but it ended up being great.
Such a cool bike.
I want one of those.
S-Video. Who's still using S-Video?
This is an old clip of
when
they were
okay.
working.
Okay,
really
It's not
important
that
moment.
old. I think it's 2010 or so.
Really important moment. Wait, let me see if I can do it. He's a legend that's becoming more legendary.
That sounded like Robert Kraft.
It could be. Not Richard. Robert.
Famous words.
Beautiful cue and a beautiful moment with the top.
You're led in one direction like it's going to be okay.
Yeah, several of these. Christopher Nolan's a master of this.
Yeah.
The end of the movie.
Michael Caine.
And same thing, Nolan working with Hans Zimmer, they have an understanding
Correct.
of what the
I was
other one's
thinking
going to
about
do
that.
so much that they can tell a story and the other person can fill in whatever needs to go wherever it needs to go. But you know that this is a conversation on Inception they had early on, we need this to feel a certain way at the end of the movie.
Is that a digital top? Because that's another perfect.
I don't think so.
It's like the plastic bag. Like,
Yeah, I
how
was
many
wondering.
takes with that pan down to the table?
Trent Reznor and Nine Inch Nails.
I actually, in this sequence coming up, I like to watch Atticus while Trent is talking. Atticus looks slightly amused by all of it, and it's just fun to watch him.
Authenticity in music and sound to a picture.
When we pulled up to Trent's house, we were outside like, we're about to go into Trent Reznor's house. This is pretty cool.
It is like weird with some of those people who you've heard their music forever, and then you meet them at some point, and especially if you're at their house.
Yeah, it's just
and,
like normal
their
surroundings.
kids just hanging out watching cartoons or whatever.
That's exactly what it was. The dog was sleeping with his paws in the air on the couch. Who's this guy?
Now we're selling movie tickets. This is really kind of one of the put the movie over, I thought.
That's your signature look, Robert. The sweater with the collar.
Yeah.
I
he's a trendsetter, man.
It's also, I don't have a mirror in my house, so I just go with what works. See, here he is, just kind of.
Trent gave us our only F-bomb in the movie.
Yeah,
Nice.
thanks for the M rating in Australia, Trent.
Oh yeah, we did, right?
Yeah,
we submitted it.
We're
with
up there with movies that have I'm sure people in Australia are like,
well,
what?
Nate's makeout scene from earlier that he shot is.
Yeah, well, not the current version. The original version was a little more graphic.
That's true. We had to go. That might be a little risque for the brain sequence. They had really cool lighting in their studio. They could change the temperature. I mean, nowadays it's kind of normal with the different hue bulbs, but they had the ambient light changing, so they could change the mood. In
Kenny,
Trent
didn't
and
you
Atticus.
cry at Captain Phillips? Henry Jackman?
A little bit. I think I told you that.
You did.
Oh no, I said it at a Q&A.
Yeah, maybe that's where yeah.
Dude, Tom Hanks, man. That when he, spoiler alert, he
it is
gets
a great
rescued.
movie. Yeah.
And that
Great
moment, it was like a 5-minute scene with no cuts, and he just delivered.
Film music has changed fairly radically.
Very radical.
It's great the way this refreshes. I thought this was really perfect filmmaking on Fincher's part.
Yeah.
That kind of coming in.
Inviting artists who...
Yeah, let's see. Got a teacup, a skull, something else
There's
on the
a-
table there.
There's a wagon in
Well,
there.
look
I
at
wish you could have got a shot of that Joker.
his
sketch.
lamps. His lamps
yeah.
are skulls.
Tell the Joker sketch story, Matt.
Yeah, well, he didn't have it there, but he was talking about how the original look of the Joker came from a Francis Bacon painting that Zimmer had on his taped to the side of his computer. And when he and Nolan met about something very early on in The Dark Knight, Nolan said, "Oh, what's that you got there? Is that something that can?" And the story goes that and it looks very similar. We have a post on our website, score-movie.com. If you scroll back or Google search Hans Zimmer, Joker look, but it looks very similar what Heath Ledger ended up looking like, and this painting, and it was because Nolan and Zimmer met early on in the process, which is kind of an interesting way, again, of collaborating with a composer. and that affecting the art somewhere else in the movie that has nothing to do with the music.
Oh, this is that scene. So if you look in the background on the left, you can see a light. There was actually an interview being conducted in the other room, and this was Alex Miskey, one of the other cinematographers.
Yep.
Just happened to see them discussing something and picked up a camera and shot this whole sequence, and it wasn't really planned, or nobody was... The rest of the crew was in the other room conducting an interview.
Yeah, it was just him shooting all this stuff.
He did an amazing job finding this moment, which really captures how one little thing can change the sound, and in a big way. I mean, it sounds so much different when they use the fingernails.
I wondered a few times, we never referred or defined what cue meant early in the... I think we realized after we were done with the movie, and we thought, oh crap, is that going to make any sense when someone sees it? I guess you can put that together pretty easily.
You can infer it contextually.
I remember thinking, like, should we do vocabulary on the screen or something early on? But it would have felt weird, and we decided not to do anything like that.
And the payoff wouldn't be that great either.
Yeah.
Here's what a cue is, and then an hour later, final cue.
The word of the day is cue.
Yeah.
Like Sesame Street.
Word and letter of the day.
This is another great Miskey shot here.
Yeah, Dutch
Boom.
angle. And there's Nate in the top right of the screen. You see shooting the reverse angle.
I like the way Hector...
Does everyone make a cameo at some point in this?
No, you cut me out of everything. Thank you.
Are you really not anywhere in this?
I'm not.
There was one part that
and John, I know you're not.
There was one part I was in, and you were like, we got to cut that part down. I'm like, oh, convenient. So now in 20 years, I'll never know what I look like.
You're still in a reflection somewhere, though, aren't you?
No.
Really?
I don't think so.
Oh.
I mean, I've only seen this movie 170,000 times, so I could have missed it.
There's Howard Shore. You met him up in New York.
Oh, yeah, that was a funny day,
Upstate.
too. His art studio is really echoey, and it's upstate New York in this really small little area, and it's really quiet. But on that particular day, there was a farmer's market across the street with a live band, and we had to go...
Of course.
We had to go slip them a 20 and say, can you guys not play for like 30 minutes?
For $20, we'll not play for 3 days.
We're musicians.
Is this the same studio that we were in? Because I don't recognize it.
It was the other room where we
I see.
Yeah, Steve Jablonski's studio, which is in a really cool spot. He's right next door to James Newton Howard. And
around the
just
corner
down
from
the street from... Yeah, a whole bunch of them. Hans.
And Chris Beck is not far away.
Yeah.
Matt, your cameo was just right before this as we walk into
I thought you were
his
saying
studio.
that was his cameo, one of the Transformers. Wasn't great.
Is
that
it?
Matt?
Yeah, when Jablonski walks
I'm
into his
in the background,
studio,
you're
you're
right,
in the
yeah.
background setting something
and
up.
so is Mubarak,
yes.
who came along with us for that interview.
One of our Kickstarter donator producers.
Yep.
Who is coincidentally, I think, the Prince of Kuwait.
Yeah, and we found out has a ton of Instagram followers.
Yeah,
and
he
like
and
Steve were chatting. He was like, "Are you ready to get a bunch of follows? Because you probably will."
He's like, "I'm going to tag you
Steve's
in
like,
a
"Oh,
post,
okay."
and I have 1 million followers, so you might start
Right.
seeing some activity on your phone."
Mixed up loud, otherwise you're not going to hear it. You want your intention to be clear.
Some close-ups there of the keyboard. I remember we were looking for a couple shots. A couple of those shots are not the actual shot of him hitting the keys, and we it was all there, but we had to sequence it
double?
together. Yeah. But no, we tried to sync it up with those shots so that you could tell when he was stopping the music, so it didn't. The music just didn't end suddenly, and you were like, "What just happened to the music?" But something to show the ending of it.
I think this was the first sequence of the movie that was put together completely. We left this and we left the shoot, and then a couple of days later you sent me and you were like, "What do you think of this?" And I watched it and I was like, this movie's going to be awesome. If we can get more stuff like this.
I don't know why I feel like
I just thought it was so cool, and it illustrated so much the importance of what music does, and it was just the way you see the sliders going up and feeling the difference with the instruments coming in is just really cool.
Yep. It was good music in that moment, too.
Remember this part? We originally were using the
This
whiz.
is my favorite look. They look at each other and they're kind of, "Hey, man, I'm cool." "Yeah, I'm cool, too." See ya, dude.
We had the Wiz Khalifa song from the soundtrack in here originally, and it didn't really hit home.
Didn't we blended it somehow, right?
Well, because
Didn't we
that's what's playing in the movie right there.
Right.
Is the Wiz Khalifa.
But somewhere we moved we dissolved from one into the other.
Yeah, we tried to blend it, and it really didn't.
No.
With what he was talking about, it didn't.
But
illustrate.
the end of that movie, I remember it got a lot of praise because Paul Walker, there was that freak accident, and this was a movie that came out. I think his brother shot a lot of the other scenes so that they could finish doing Furious 7.
Yeah, it was like a body double.
The end, it's a goofy, action, car movie that's not a super. It doesn't take itself that seriously. But the ending of that was like a pretty touching little
it was
and
powerful.
tasteful ending, and with the Paul and Vin Diesel, the two kind of stars of the series, driving off different directions. It was kind of a little thing. So anyway, Brian talked about that. We thought that belonged somewhere in the film.
This part right here, it was so dark in that theater, the colorists were able to tweak that, but it was so hard to even see if Brian was in focus or what was happening. 'Cause as you can imagine in a movie theater, I mean, the lights weren't on. That was all in post, lightened up a little bit. Because he was creeping, watching people watch a movie there.
I think there's a big laugh coming up in this sequence,
there is.
too.
This is one of our bigger laughs in the movie. And then I do something that's
slightly odd.
Slightly embarrassing.
Oh, that's okay. You could see the Ant-Man ad on the first Ant-Man.
And see if they're humming or whistling.
If they're humming or whistling.
It is amazing how many times that.
The really interesting thing, so he mentioned in the interview that he likes to go to movie theater, and some different composers have mentioned this too, but they like to go, sit in with a regular audience and see how those people react. And from watching our documentary play all over the place, there are certain things that everyone's going to chuckle at, and there are certain things where one audience might really enjoy it and one audience might not. It's not funny at all to them.
Yeah, depending
or
on
whatever
the age of the audience, we noticed in different film
and
festivals.
I'm not sure what it is with certain regional things too that seemed like I remember a few did not find the Mark Mothersbaugh comment about it looking suggestive looking.
Yeah.
Several audiences were kind of like,
This offends me.
But then a lot of others,
we would always look at each other like, didn't hit here, I guess.
I guess it didn't work.
But it's interesting to see how stuff lands because, you edit stuff for days and hours and hours.
Where a film that you make in the United States that has a big response, you show overseas and you go to one of those screenings.
They don't get it.
Doesn't land.
Wow, yeah.
Humor doesn't land.
How cool was this part? We're like, Hans, are you working on anything? And he's like, I could just play something. And he started playing, and it was like, is this happening right now? He's just sketching.
And our audio was not good for this, but we're.
Oh yeah, thanks to Peter.
What are you gonna do? Because
the original, we weren't tapped into his board, so you could hear like his fingers hitting the plastic keys.
Yeah, the little clicking. Yeah, which
But
we're just recording through the air.
Peter did some magic on that to make it, because it was a little distracting from what he was playing.
Yeah, and you can, if you listen closely, you can still hear it. But Peter really worked some magic on it.
Pulling my hair out.
But yeah, it was one of those things where. We thought early on there were a couple things we wanted to ask composers to try to put together, get their version of a certain thing, give them a framework and say, hey, a pirate sound, what does that sound like? Play, like just to kind of tap into the way that they hear something a little bit differently, and some composers were able to do that, and some were they needed more than just they needed a picture, they needed something else, but. When somebody like Hans Zimmer says, I got something, it's an interesting, small little insight into the way that he hears, the way music should be, which is a really interesting thing that we captured there almost entirely accidentally.
This is Ryan Taubert writing this amazing ending cue, which is also our show theme for Score the Podcast. We just stripped a couple of the stems off of it.
Yeah, I think it's just the rhythm and a couple other things here. No strings, no.
There is something about what.
Oh, it's a great sequence.
And his whole soundtrack is on iTunes. You can order it there and support him. All of that goes to him. It doesn't go to us or any. I guess iTunes gets a cut, but aside from that, it all goes to Ryan. So go out, support him too.
I love how this kind of quickly takes you through a journey of what we just experienced, but it feels complete now. And the music does such a good job of making you feel like triumphant.
I actually like the edit right to the final screen. Feels so tied to the music.
Yeah. That's the first time you see the title right here at the end.
It was originally at the beginning with the Rocky sequence, and
this
is so much more powerful.
Nice.
Yeah, we were kind of. I was a little nervous about not showing the title at the start, but then I'm like, you know what? Anybody who's going to play this knows what it is at the start.
Yay!
We'll hold that for the end.
Yay!
Yay!
There's a lot of people who message us and say, "There's nothing about James Horner in the film," and I think they don't stick around through the credits.
Oh, I know. That's really disappointing when audiences get up. I've been in those, and they're halfway up the aisle.
Yeah.
And then they turn
and then
around.
we told a lot of some of the film festivals, we'd be like, don't put the lights up because there's a scene, and some of them would do it, and then they'd go, oh, and they'd turn it back down. But I think nowadays it's almost become customary to wait through the credits. When I was a kid, you'd go to the theater and you would just leave, but there's so many things after the credits now that it's become a thing to just wait. So more and more people.
I think more in LA too than when you're in the middle of the country. I think there might be a little more appreciation for the craft.
Oh, there definitely is. Yeah, just the credits in general. But yeah, the way Marvel has trained people to stick around for certain things, I feel like some people hang out a little bit longer now.
Buddy, it's you.
This was such a nice touch and a great way too. I mean, we had so many people to thank in the credits, and a great way to get audiences to stick around while those names rolled.
Yeah, and there's a lot.
Look at that. Just so many around the world. Thanks to everyone. If you're listening and you're one of those people, the Kickstarter and the Indiegogo, without everybody's donations.
It really is amazing. We're now in this era where you can have 1,800 people from around the world help to create something. And, like this movie took a lot of, obviously, time, but also just the resources required, and everybody who pre-orders something and doesn't know what the movie's going to end up like, but really like the idea of it. It's amazing we're now in this era where that kind of coordination can happen, and it enables a film to be made.
The internet really is a powerful thing of connecting.
I never knew Leonardo Dicaprio was such a good artist. That's one of the other amazing parts about this film is that you learn things about particular actors.
Yeah.
Really good with charcoal.
Oh man, that's a nice button.
I think on the original clip had a little nudity in it. We had to zoom in and crop that out for this. I think Jim Cameron covers that, so we keep our
It's
rating.
you, buddy. And
Jim, I'm in this picture, but we edited it out.
We did. I think you're right on the left. I think we would have seen the side of your head.
Left on the right.
Jim sent us that picture at the end, didn't he?
No.
I did.
No, that was Robert.
Robert sent that picture.
Yeah.
And you're in it?
I'm in it.
Yeah.
Somebody,
Oh,
I think
I'm sorry.
my assistant at the time took a picture of myself, James.
Was that was Avatar, right?
Yeah. Standing outside the studio. And you said, do you have any picture of Jim and James? I said, I have one iPhone photo.
Yeah.
With me in it, thinking, yeah, I'm in it. But
it was one of those last, photos of the two of them, and you were in it as well.
Yeah.
So I apologize for cutting you out of it.
I'm on the cutting room floor. I've always wanted to be one of those guys who say, yeah, well,
we
your
step
scene
on you
didn't
every
make
time
it.
we walk into the
That's
cutting
right.
room.
Right. Well, I hope this gave our listeners a little something extra they didn't get from the movie the first time they watched.
Yeah, this is a special little episode, and we're going to continue, of course, every Tuesday, bringing you new episodes of Score the Podcast. So make sure to subscribe on Apple Podcasts and rate and review if you like what you're hearing. And you can follow us on Twitter at Score the Podcast as well. Every week we lately have been giving away a prize almost every week because of the Name That Score success stories we've been having.
You can test your knowledge of famous scores and see if you can play along. And if somebody runs the table, gets them all, then we give away a prize.
So hopefully you watched along with us, or if you plan to, you can get the film at score-movie.com.
Yeah, our collector's edition there. It's a Blu-ray and a DVD that are in the same collector's edition box there. So you can get it there. I'll even autograph it for you.
Ooh.
Also available for those that want to go even deeper are Score the Interviews Volumes 1 and 2.
Yeah,
So
there you go. Oh, John,
full-length
yes. I almost forgot.
That is true. The
There's,
raw interviews of many of what you saw in the film.
And in the book, there's a handful of things that people have been saying. I really want to get, if there's more to this movie that I can plug into. So a lot of that we've tried to make available.
Who do I talk to get that Score hoodie that's on there's a sweatshirt on the website?
I think you talked to PayPal.
I think you got to go through the website.
Mr. PayPal? It's Mr. PayPal to you?
Well,
Very nice.
with that, if you stuck around through the end, thanks for tuning in and watching the film with us. This was fun for us. We haven't done this really. So, John, thanks for joining us on the podcast, this special edition.
I'd like to thank my co-hosts of this incredible event, Kenny Holmes, Mash Raider, and
That's
Matt
me.
Schrader, Jonathan Wilbanks.
Jonathan Wilbanks.
Thanks for joining us on our commentary.